Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started. It's about 6 minutes after noon. I now know there's a lot of stuff that needs to be presented, so I will start without any delays. Just to let you know, towards the end, I will, if time allows, I'll be able to take some general questions. But if you have any specific questions regarding your situation, what I recommend is contacting our office of Global Learning International Services and speaking with one of our immigration advisors who can take a look at your case and then help you with your specifics. So I'll also ask that you keep your mics muted during the presentation, and we can, you can unmute them towards the end. Um, and I believe there will also be my co-worker here, Lauren Gabusi, who's joined me, I believe, is going to be recording also this presentation, so that may be available at a later time. Without further ado, I will get started. So my name is Harsh Sisodia. I'm one of the senior immigration advisors in the Office of Global Learning International Services. And this presentation is on work authorizations for F and J students. So we will go through today. Um, we'll start with maintaining status. I'm going to go in brief what that means. Then we'll move to the F-1 practical training components, and then J-1 academic training will close this out. So let's start with maintaining status. Essentially, to maintain valid student status as an F or J student, one of the things you must do is enroll full-time each semester. You also need to update your address. That is the U.S. residential address each and every time you move while you're in the U.S. Make sure that you also keep your documents valid, meaning that they're not expired, such as passport, I-20, or if you're a J-1, a DS 2019. And the final component is very important, which is making sure that you do not work off campus without work authorization. Essentially, this is what this presentation is about, is seeking work authorization. And as a reminder, these are just some of the things that are required to maintain status. If you go to our web page and under maintaining status, you will see a list of other items as well. So please, I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that stuff. And I also encourage you to make sure that you explore our website. It is quite extensive and has a lot of information regarding international matters, especially for F and J students. Okay, so the work authorization. There are two kind of components under this: on campus and off campus. On-campus employment essentially is that if you're an enrolled student as an F or J, you can be paid to work on campus for a total of 20 hours per week, and you don't require any special authorization for this. Essentially, this is while you are registered, you are limited to working 20 hours per week. What that means is, let's say for this fall semester, you're enrolled for classes, you are limited to a cap of 20 hours per week. Okay. If you work over 20 hours, then this is a violation of your immigration status. So I would recommend that you monitor your weekly employment hours and make sure that you don't exceed the allotted 20 hours per week. Now, you could work more than that when there's a semester break, such as the winter break. If you are not enrolled for anything during winter break, you could work on campus more than 20 hours. Same thing would apply for, let's say, for a spring break, when there's the regular semester spring break that happens. And during that time period, you could work more than 20 hours. Now, this 20 hours limit is for both as a combination of on and off campus. Okay. The other part is off-campus employment. This is strictly in your field of study. So whatever your major is, whatever field that you're getting your degree in, this is where you would seek employment in. Okay. So essentially, after having been in F-1 status for one full academic year, or if you're a J student after one semester of full-time enrollment, you are eligible to apply for off-campus work authorization. And then there are two types of off-campus work authorizations for F-1 students called practical training, and one type for J-1 students called academic training. And I will discuss those in the next slides here. So let's start with the F-1 curricular practical training, or more commonly known as CPT. Now, here's some eligibility criteria for CPT. That you would have to be in F-1 status and have been enrolled for 2 full semesters with an active CVIS record. You're still enrolled and continuing in the degree program and have not completed your program. So essentially, CPT work authorization is while you're still studying. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are in a 2-year program. Okay, let's say you're a master's in a 2-year program. You started your program this fall. So essentially you are enrolled full-time this semester, full-time next semester. And as a continuing student, if you're not enrolled in summer, then you could apply for a full-time CPT for summer. And okay, if you are a student who's only here on a 1-year program and your program will end in spring, then you would not be eligible for CPT. It's the other employment authorization that I'm going to discuss that you would qualify for. So this is important to keep in mind. The other thing is you have to have a job offer in your field of study. Essentially, CPT is employer specific. So you get authorization for a particular employer for a specific start and end date and number of hours and where you'll be working, meaning a location where you'll be working. The internship essentially has to be curricularly connected. So it has to be either connected to a course, a thesis or dissertation that you're doing, or if it's a required for your degree. Required for degree essentially means that it's part of the curriculum that is required for you to do an internship in order to graduate with that degree. And very, very few programs at Cornell are like that. I think there are only 2 or 3 programs that are like that. Essentially, either it has to be connected to a course, or it's, if you're a graduate student, it's either has to be connected to a thesis or dissertation. Now, the important part is that the CPT authorization is granted from the Office of Global Learning International Services. We are the ones who are authorized to grant that. By just having an employment letter, that does not automatically grant you employment authorization. Okay. And it's important that you have this employment authorization before you start working. So it's important that you plan well in advance. I would say you should apply for CPT at least 2 weeks before your intended start date or sooner. Okay. And the other important part is that we cannot backdate any employment authorization. Right? Every employment authorization is for a future date. So your employment letter also has to reflect that future date. So some of the other parts that you, again, as a reiteration, is that you may only be used before graduation while still in your degree, as I had mentioned before, right? The good part is that CPT will generally not affect OPT, optional practical training, unless you have used 12 months or more of full-time CPT. And if I had to guess, I would say approximately 99% of the students don't reach anywhere close to 12 months of full-time CPT. The other part of CPT is that it's very important that you continue to make normal progress towards completion of your degree, and that it does not hinder your progress of degree completion. Some of the other things that about CPT are that CPT can be granted as a part-time CPT while you're registered during a semester. So for example, if you're a continuing student and you've met that one year of academic enrollment requirement, and so let's say for fall next semester, right, you wanted to take a CPT or internship for 15 hours off campus, right? Sure, you could apply for that, and then be granted permission for that if you meet all the CPT requirements. But remember that I was talking about that 20-hour work cap, right? That maximum. So let's say if you were working 15 hours off campus as a CPT, it leaves another 5 hours for you to be able to work on campus, right? So you could, again, the maximum amount of time would be 20 hours per week that you'd be allowed to work. Now, if you are, again, I had mentioned that if you're not enrolled, right, for any classes for summer as a continuing student, you could apply for a full-time of summer CPT. Now, full-time for immigration purposes means anything above 20 hours per week. Okay. So here are some dates for summer work. Essentially, the earliest you could start your summer CPT would be the date after your last exam date. Okay. And the summer CPT must end the date before the fall classes start. Okay, so you've got a date anywhere you can have your CPT, summer CPT, from the date after your last exam until the date before the fall semester begins. Now, here are some procedures. Essentially, make sure you get the work authorization before you start working. This is re-emphasized quite a bit because it's very, very important. Go to the CPT section of our website, and it details everything. What I recommend is that you follow the information sequentially because it's laid out to build upon the previous section that it's there. And it'll also that way give you a thorough understanding of what your requirements are during CPT, because you are held accountable for understanding and following those requirements. Okay, follow all directions requirements on that CPT page. If you have questions, certainly contact us. We can help you with that. Make sure that you complete the CPTE form that's on the website, and that'll get the process started. It does not automatically grant you permission, but it starts that process for requesting the CPT authorization. Okay. Essentially, what happens is that once you complete your portion, it goes to your academic advisor, who reviews and provides that academic connection to your CPT. After that, it comes to our office. We review to make sure it meets all the CPT criteria. If there are any questions, or if we have need any clarification, we will go ahead and contact you for further information. But once we approve it, you will receive a new I-20 that'll have your employment authorization on page 2. It kind of looks like this. It'll have the employer's, name, the specific start and specific end date, if it's a full-time CPT or part-time CPT, and it'll have the employer's address in there. So this then you will use to show to your employer that you have your authorization to work for that particular time and for that employer. Okay, so here are some FAQs we generally get asked. Do I need a CPT for unpaid employment? There is a website webpage actually we've got for volunteers and unpaid interns. That's under the employment section of our website. It does detail out a stark difference between what you and I think is volunteer versus what the definition of volunteer is per the Department of Labor, and information about unpaid interns. Generally, what I recommend is that if you're eligible for CPT, you should apply for CPT because it helps cover any doubts whether you were authorized for that or not. Remember that CPT does not have to be a paid position. It can be an unpaid position, but it must still be within your field of study. Okay. When should I apply for CPT? Again, you must apply before you start working, as I mentioned, at least 2 weeks before or sooner. Okay. Essentially, you want to have that employment authorization before you start working. All right, to make sure that you're not violating your immigration status. Does the internship have to be in my major? Absolutely. As I started, yes, because it's linked to your curriculum, it's linked to your major directly. You're getting practical training essentially for your field. Okay. Some common questions on job applications. Do you have U.S. work authorization for this employment? You could say yes, because it really will either say yes or no on that thing. Will you need visa sponsorship for this employment? Essentially, no, you don't need a sponsorship for CPT. CPT, you apply for yourself and seek the authorization. Okay. Will you need visa sponsorship in the future? The chances are yes. If you were to continue working beyond your F-1 status, you would need employment authorization. Are you permanently authorized to work in the United States? You are not. We're permanently authorized as a non-immigrant. Okay, so you must continue to seek employment authorization to work off campus. All right, so now we'll go to optional practical training, or OPT. So same thing for OPT. The requirements are that you must have been enrolled full-time for 1 academic year, or essentially 2 full semesters prior to starting OPT. So you must also have been in an active immigration record for 1 academic year. Practical training, again, is directly in your major field of study. Why? The key part being, again, in the name itself, right? Practical training. Okay. The good part about OPT is it is not employer specific. So you can change jobs during OPT. You can work for multiple employers simultaneously during OPT, as long as all employment is directly in your field of study. Okay, so it does not require a job offer either. So don't wait. If you, let's say, if you're graduating this semester and you're still looking for jobs, don't wait to find a job before you apply for OPT. Start the application now. Okay, and you are still in F-1 status while you're in OPT. So essentially, OPT will extend your F-1 status, because both OPT and CPT are benefits that you're applying for under the F-1 status. Okay, so first, you must seek 12 months of OPT. Okay, essentially, each time you apply, you are eligible for 12 months of OPT. Especially the way it works is it is based on successive level, right? So if you're undergrad, you finish your undergraduate degree. If you meet the OPT requirements, you apply for 12 months of OPT. Let's say you go on to a master's degree. You complete that, you meet the OPT requirements, you apply for OPT. Then let's say you go on to a doctoral degree, then you complete the doctoral degree, you'd again be able to apply for OPT if you meet those requirements. Okay, so it's essentially each successive level, right? Each higher degree level, you're able to apply for OPT, but you could not apply for multiple OPTs at the same level. For example, if you applied, you got a master's degree, you applied for OPT, you used up your 12 months of OPT, and you got another master's. Now you would not be eligible because they're at the same degree level. Okay. Essentially, OPT could be applied to be used before graduation, meaning that while you're still studying. But what I would recommend is that you don't use OPT while you're studying, because it is restrictive, okay? Because you're a continuing student and have not graduated or completed your degree requirements. Essentially, at that point, what I would say is look to CPT instead of OPT. but definitely apply for graduation for OPT to begin after your graduation. This is where majority of the students apply for OPT, is employment authorization that is after your program completion. Time used before graduation. So let's say if you were to apply for this pre-completion OPT, it would get deducted from that 12 months of total OPT time that you're allowed. Okay, so that's another reason why you want to apply for CPT instead of pre-completion OPT, as opposed to what is known as post-completion OPT. So here's some of the briefs of the application procedure. So you can apply for post-completion OPT up to 90 days before your graduation or completion date. What I would recommend is that you apply for OPT in the semester you are graduating, okay? So if you're graduating, let's say spring is your last semester, that's when you want to start to apply. But remember that the OPT itself will begin after your graduation date, okay? So don't wait. The reason, and I'll tell you in here why the reason is that because it can take up to 90 days for the employment authorization to be granted. Okay, so essentially USCIS, which is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, must receive your application no more than 30 days after our office recommends the OPT in your CVIS record. Essentially, what I tell students is once you receive that OPT I-20, go ahead and start applying. Don't wait, okay? Because that'll cause more issues later on if you exceed that 30-day window. USCIS must also receive your application no later than 60 days beyond your graduation. Okay, so there are kind of these dates, right? 90, 30, 60. Essentially, what I'll recommend is, again, start the application early. So the semester that you're graduating in, start then. As soon as you receive your OPT I-20, start the application for the OPT with USCIS, okay, and send it in right away. The other part is that if you leave the US during the 60-day grace period, which is a grace period that is granted to you once you complete your degree requirements, you must apply for OPT before you leave the US. Okay, if you leave the US without applying for OPT, then you have essentially forfeited that benefit of applying for OPT. And there are no exceptions to that. Again, I know it says here, I need to update this. It says 3 to 5 months, but we've noticed that now the applications are taking approximately 90 days. So closer to a 3-month period. So here's kind of that graphic outline of the OPT. Okay, so remember I was talking about those 90-day, 60-day, 30-day. So here kind of gives you a better idea. So in this example, let's say you are graduating, you know, your program end date is 12/31/2022. The earliest you could apply for OPT this semester would have been October 2nd. So you're right now, if you're graduating, you're well within the 90-day period before completion, and you should, if you've not applied for OPT, you should definitely apply for OPT now. Then from that 12/31 date, there is that 60-day grace period. Okay, and then this is during that grace period is when you apply for OPT, you choose when you want that start date to be, and it must fall within that 60-day grace period. Okay, there is no specific date that I can recommend. What I would say is that choose a date that's within the grace period. And also, if you have an employment offer already and they want you to start on a specific date, and if that happens to fall within the grace period, then choose that date. Okay. If you have a job offer that falls beyond, right, the grace period, then choose probably closer towards the end of the grace period to maximize your 12 months of OPT. Okay. So essentially what happens is that if you get that 12 months of OPT, right? So let's say you choose a start date of February 15th, 2023. Well, then the end date is generally February 14th, the following year. Okay. It's that one calendar year that you get. So to reiterate, make sure you apply no earlier than 90 days before your graduation, but definitely within the 90-day period. Okay. You could apply during the grace period, but what I would recommend is that's going to be quite late. And remember, it takes 90 days for the government to process. So you could essentially be waiting for the employment authorization if you apply for OPT during grace period, and just be waiting, and it's just wasting part of your 12 months of OPT. Okay. Again, to reiterate, make sure that USCIS receives your employment application no more than 30 days after. An advisor here, immigration advisor, has recommended that OPT. And when you get that OPT I-20, it'll show on page 1, right? When by that signature, when that was entered into the system. Okay. So again, as soon as you get that I-20 for the OPT, start the application. So once your employment authorization is approved, you will receive an employment authorization document, more commonly known as an EAD, and it's about the size of a credit card. It'll have your photo, it'll have your biographical information, including your name. It'll also have specific start and end date. This is the period that the government has authorized you to work. Okay, so make sure that you don't start working before the authorized start date, and you don't continue working after the authorized end date. All right, for during this period. So it's very important. Also, make sure that when you get the card, to look at it to make sure there are no errors, right? Your name, or maybe a start date was wrong that you had requested. If there are any errors, contact our office right away, and we can kind of guide you on what you need to do to request a correction. So there are reporting requirements when you're on OPT. You must report any changes, right? Any of these following changes within 10 days of that change, such as a change to your name. Maybe you got your name officially changed, your passport got updated. Make sure you get that proof to us, so we can change your name in your CBIS record and give you a new I-20. U.S. residential address or mailing address has changed. Make sure that you update that. Any employment changes, such as starting or ending a job, right? So report those things. That includes names and addresses of all employment OPT employers, start date, end date of all OPT employment. Okay. And you must also be able to demonstrate how the job is related to your major. Essentially, if the government were to ask you, you should be able to show, yes, this is, I'm a computer science major and I'm doing this X job, and this is how it's related to my major. And yes, somebody with my degree would actually be doing this job in this field. Okay. If you're unsure of how a job is related, what I would recommend is maybe career services office can help you with that, or your department may be able to give you some advice on, what type of jobs do people receive for this particular degree that you have. Okay, so when OPT is approved and the start date of OPT arrives, you will get an email from the government, and it is for the SCVP portal, or the Student Exchange Visitor Portal, and that'll allow you access to your CVIS OPT record. And in that, what you can do is you'll be able to change your address, you'll be able to change and update your OPT employer information, add OPT employer information, modify it if necessary, but you won't be able to delete it. Okay. So again, this is now you being able to do this directly. You don't have to wait for us. The email will come from this email, do not reply.scvp@ice.dhs.gov. That .gov means that it's a government email that's coming, and this is a free account that you'll be able to set up. No private information is generally asked for, no social security numbers are asked for, certainly no money is asked for. Okay. If you get an email that seems to be charging or asking for really personal information, such as social security number or bank account information, contact us, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be a fraudulent email spam trying to get your account information. So be very careful of that. Again, you'll use your SCBP portal to update your address and employer information. If there are any problems accessing the portal, contact us, and maybe we'll be able to, fix that for you, or at least be able to provide the appropriate guidance. Extending OPT. So there is an option to extend OPT, and there are two ways of doing that. One is called the H-1 cap gap extension, and the other one is called the STEM OPT extension. So, and I'll cover those in brief here. So cap gap extension, essentially each year there is a cap or a number, a limit on how many H-1Bs can be granted each year. And that's known as the H-1B cap. And essentially what happens is, but the date your EAD ends, right? That employment authorization, and essentially when the annual H-1B begins, which tends to be October 1st of each year, there tends to be a gap between those dates. Okay, so like in this example, it shows that the OPT end date or on that EAD card is 6/30/2023, and this person has an H-1B approved to begin on October 1st. Well, there are those dates, right, between June 30th and October 1st. Well, what happens? How do you maintain status and continue working? Well, this H-1B cap gap extension allows you to continue working. It extends your OPT and F-1 status so that you can continue working in that status until September 30th. And on October 1st, your H-1B becomes active and you are H-1B. Okay. So essential things about H-1B: that you are an OPT and your employer has applied for F-1, for H-1B processing, and that it is not a consular processing H-1B. So it's in change of status. And change of status means the employer requested the government or USCIS to change your F-1 status to an H-1B while you're in the United States. A consular processing means that you will only gain that H-1B status once you depart the United States, go to a U.S. consulate or embassy and apply for the H-1B for what you've been approved, and then you re-enter the United States in H-1B status. Majority of the things that I've seen tend to be change of status and not consular processing. But the receipt notice and the approval notice that you get and your employer receives will state, will have that information if it is a consular processing H. And you can also ask your employer which one have they applied for. You will get a receipt notice or an approval notice when your H-1B is approved, and you can contact us with that receipt notice, and we can see if the cap gap extension is reflected in your CVIS record. If it's not, we will need that receipt notice or approval notice to request a cap gap extension be put in your F-1 record or your CVIS record. Okay. And essentially and one of the other parts is that your OPT ends before October 1st, right? If your OPT continues, let's say beyond, you've had that authorization, chances are it's not going to automatically be reflected that you have cap gap, and because there's no gap, right, in that cap. Okay, so STEM OPT extensions, generally, if you are in a degree that is part of the STEM designated list of degrees by the US government, and falls under this STEM category, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or you have received a previous US STEM degree, right, from another institution, let's say, then that's one of the requirements to apply for the extension. Your job also, current job also, or the job that you're going to start under the STEM extension has to be in that STEM field. Okay. And your employer must also be enrolled in a government program called the E-Verify program. If you're not sure if the employer is in E-Verify or not, easiest thing is to do is to just ask the employer for that to see if they are or not. And you're currently on OPT, the 12-month OPT, or on cap-gap extension. Okay, so you have to have a status, right, such as OPT or cap-gap extension before you can apply for the STEM extension. The extension being the important part of that. Okay. Here are some of the other eligibility criteria. You and your employer will have to complete a training plan. You may not work for a staffing agency because it has to be a bona fide employer-employee relationship, and there has to be regular on-site supervision and training provided to you. You have to have a supervisor on site, as I was saying, right? So that's why that staffing agency is not an option, and also that you're getting that actual training that you're supposed to, and the and that it's going to be a successful training for you. Okay. You may apply as early as 90 days before the end of your OPT or cap-gap extension. Okay. And keep this in mind. This is very important, that the government must receive your extension application before either the end date of your EAD or the cap-gap, whichever one is there. If they receive it even a day after that, they will not accept your application and they will deny that application. For details on the cap-gap, on STEM extension, make sure you go to our employment section of our website and look at the STEM extension page. Again, follow this information on all these pages sequentially, because that's how it's built, okay? It builds on top of one another, and then you'll also get a better understanding of the entire process. Okay, requirements while you're on STEM OPT extension. For each job that you do or each job that you start, you must complete a separate training plan. You are also required to make sure that you provide our office with updates every 6 months. You'll also get an email from the US government when it's time for providing this update. At the end of a 12-month period of your STEM extension, you will receive, you'll have to complete a self-evaluation. And then if you continue on with the same employer, after 24 months, you'll have to complete a final evaluation. There are reporting details, STEM reporting details on our website under Report Your OPT Employment. Go to the STEM employment section and it'll spell out all the details for each of these things, okay? There are a limited number of days that you can be employed while you're on OPT, and that is 90 days of unemployment is what you're allowed for the entire 12 months. Okay, so that's a total of 90 days under that. And it gets extended for another 60 days under a STEM extension. So you could have as much as 150 days of unemployment time, right? Let's say if you're a STEM major, you're an OPT, you didn't use any of these unemployment time days. This gets carried into the STEM extension when you apply for that, right? So that way it gets counted in addition to that 60 days to a maximum of 150 days of unemployment time that you're allowed. What counts as employment? Okay, again, work that is directly in your major field of study. Now, the key part of the STEM extension part is that unpaid employment cannot count towards that. It can count, unpaid employment is okay while you're under the 12-month of OPT, but not for the STEM extension. For the STEM extension, you must be paid, okay? It can be, again, part-time or full-time. Okay, you could work, again, there's no restriction. You could work for let's say as a researcher for your advisor, as long as that work is being done directly in your field of study, right? Under 12 months OPT, you could be self-employed. Again, that employment though has to be directly in your field of study. Make sure you have the appropriate licenses and be able to demonstrate that yes, you are actively engaged in your business and that you're working at least 20 hours per week or more. Okay, you cannot be self-employed when you're on STEM extension. You have to work for an employer. travel while you're on OPT, certainly you can travel out of the US, of course, during, fall and normal break time, and re-enter with usual documents. But once you apply for OPT or you're close to graduation, you must have either your OPT card, that EAD card that I was talking about, or the receipt notice of your OPT filing with the government as part of the additional documents needed in addition to the normal immigration documents that you need. If you've been approved, then definitely you also need to have your proof of employment, such as the employment letter, to re-enter the US, okay? The documents here, it kind of spells out what you need: a valid passport, make sure that your current F-1 visa is still valid, has not expired. You certainly can apply for F-1 visa again under OPT. Remember, the challenge lies in always being able to prove ties to home country, right? Why would you go back, right? Because you're applying for a non-immigrant visa. The government wants to know what are those reasons, why, the compelling things that would make you want to come back to your home country, right? A signed I-20, essentially the signature on the I-20 while you're studying is valid. Travel signature is valid for 1 year, but when you're on OPT or STEM extension, it's only valid for 6 months. Okay. Make sure you have your EAD or receipt notice, depending on which one you received. If you have a job offer, if it's approved, then definitely a job offer. That is either a current one or the one that shows that you'll be starting in the future at a certain date. Here's some of the things. Do not enter the US as a tourist. Let's say if you have a tourist visa, make sure that you don't enter. So to double check before you leave that immigration officer, make sure that you've been stamped and entered as an F-1, essentially, because if you get entered into this country under another status, visa status, then it invalidates your OPT, okay? Take a look at our travel on OPT section of our website, and that'll give you all the details about this stuff that I just spoke. Okay, now on to a J-1 work authorization. Essentially, the same thing is for J-1s is called academic training. Again, the practical training has to be directly in the field of study. The practical training can be done during summer vacation if you're not enrolled, or after graduation. And again, the job has to be directly in your field of study. The job must begin before the end of your 30-day grace period. Now, as a J-1 student, so if you're F-1, don't pay attention to this. If you're J-1, this is the one you want to pay attention to, is that you have a 30-day grace period as a J-1. And your J-1 work authorization can be either 18 months or the length of your program, whichever is shorter. Okay, so those who are, if you're a master's student or so, and you've got, let's say, a 2-year program, the maximum academic training you'd be allotted would be 18 months. There's an exception to that, and that is if you are a doctoral student. If you're a doctoral student, you could have authorization up to 36 months in increments of 18 months. Okay. Here's some criteria for J-1 eligibility, and that is your DS 2019 was issued by Cornell and has not expired. If your DS 2019 is issued by another entity, then you must contact them for issuance of any academic training. Make sure that you request the application and approval from our office. We're the ones who are going to grant you. If you're on, again, Cornell's DS 2019, our office is the one that grants you that authorization. Make sure that you apply well in advance of your program completion, and that you have a job offer to apply for. And make sure that you will also get an approval for J-1 academic training in writing. So essentially, not only will that training be listed on your DS 2019, but you'll get a letter in addition to that. The other part is that you have to make sure that you continue to be in good academic standing, or are in good academic standing. and that your proposed employment is directly related to your field of study as confirmed by your academic advisor. This is also a two-part thing that you apply, then it goes to your academic advisor, and then it comes to us. For details on academic training, make sure you go to our academic webpage on our website, and that'll again spell out all the details. Okay, so the other part is that if you have any US-based income, right, such as wages, fellowships, for living expenses or travel grant, then you must file a tax return the following fiscal year. So essentially, anytime you've earned any income in the year 2022, you will file for taxes in spring of 2023. So it's always 1 year behind, and our tax section has all the details. If you've never filed taxes, it also has beginner basic understanding of US taxes and how to go about filing for taxes. So another part is that you must apply for Social Security if you are employed. Okay, that's very important. The interesting part is that if you are not working, you're not eligible for SSN, but if you apply for OPT, that application, the government application, has a section where you can simultaneously file for an SSN in that application. So make sure you take a look at that. But if you're a continuing student, make sure you go to our SSN page to learn the details about how to obtain an SSN. You don't need an SSN to start working, but definitely need one to continue your work authorization. All right, so if you have any questions or want to get in touch with us, we're located in 300 Caldwell Hall. Our office hours are 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, while advising is by appointment. So that's from 10 to noon, Monday through Friday, and 2 to 4 p.m. in Monday through Friday. And you can contact us via Zoom, email, phone. So you got various different ways, okay? And then you can, of course, go to our website and make an appointment. Go to the website, and on the top right-hand side, it'll say Get Advice. Click on that. It'll take you to the page where you can set up an appointment.